guitar solos. Sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. Right, that's about it. Video over. But seriously, over the next few videos, I'm going to be examining the fine art of the guitar solo. Firstly, I'm going to be getting the most, no doubt, controversial one out of the way, where we're going to be looking at famous, iconic songs that are really good, but have really bad guitar solos in. I just thought this was a pretty cool concept that I haven't really heard anyone talk about before. Some of them you may agree with, and others, no doubt, you will not agree with. So I've done my best to try and rationalize each one. But as always, if you disagree, then please do feel free to write why in the comments down below and tell me how wrong I am. Please do. Let's get started. Now, if there's one guitarist I think I'll never understand, it's Thomas Morellian. You know, if you're a struggling musician out there, then, you know, just take solace in the fact that Tom Morello managed to somehow make a lucrative career out of just, you know, making recycled Led Zeppelin riffs and playing Nina noises on his pedals. At least with Rage Against the Machine, I can kind of understand and give it a pass because, you know, that sound was very unique and fresh at the time. And all the weird noises definitely fit the vibe that they were going for. Oh, but it just always infuriated me that in Audioslave, you know, playing alongside literally the greatest rock and roll singer that will, you know, ever exist, that he was still adamant on playing the fucking Ninos. Like, imagine writing one of the most emotional, heartfelt rock ballads, you know, ever made, and thinking, well, yeah, you know, this song is really cool and all, but I really think it could benefit from some autistic Nina noises with my pedal. Like, let me show you. Just truly awful. Metallica's return in 2022 was one of the most hotly anticipated comebacks in living memory. You know, overall, it was pretty solid with some really killer performances by, well, especially James. And unfortunately, I wish I could say the same about their lead guitarist. No matter how much Kurt tried to defend his playing on this album, it does not excuse the fact that this was, you know, objectively some of the weakest, least inspired playing of his whole career. Yes, it was pretty cool and refreshing that he wanted to just sort of like, you know, raw dog these solos and just improv them right off the bat. You know, big respect for that. But, you know, unfortunately, bit of a wake-up call. You know, Mr. Hammett does not have the improvisational chops to be able to, you know, pull this off to a standard that is expected for a Metallica release. You know, the biggest metal band in the planet. You know, I was struggling to think about which song specifically to use as an example from this album, but after much consideration, I think that If Darkness Had a Sun is the best example in terms of, you know, song strength versus solo not strength. Man, I remember the first time I heard that solo, God, I'm choked on my bloody tuna sandwich. It literally, like, I'm not even exaggerating here, it literally just sounds like he turned up like 2 hours late for the recording session, just plugged the guitar in and just fucking let one rip, you know, without hearing the song, like, ever at all. Listen to it back once and it's just like, yeah, that's all right, yeah, I'll do it, that was good, yeah, nice, yeah. The licks he's playing in this solo have like nothing to do with what's going on in the arrangement or like the rest of the song. It's like he's just listening to his isolate guitar and just like jamming on his own, right? Not to mention the like, a lot of the solo is just plain out of time, and I don't know how it even ended up on the record in this state. Jump! So whether you love or hate Van Halen, you absolutely cannot deny that Jump is by far one of the most, you know, iconic signature songs of that cheese-laden 80s era of guitar-driven music. Eddie might be an untouchable guitar god, you know, perhaps probably the most influential of all time, all things considered. But that does not mean that absolutely everything he played was a, absolute gift to our logos. Even though his style was super cool and, really unique, especially for the time, I don't think you can deny that just the egregious amounts of, flash and twiddle didn't always fit Van Halen's otherwise, super commercial radio-friendly music. I've always thought that the solo to Jump is just like so jarring and out of place. It was just like shoehorned in just for the sake of Eddie to be able to do his thing, Also, not only does it modulate up one semitone for the solo, but it also uses the relative minor of the new key. Which is what sort of like adds to this just really, really just like jarring feeling when the solo starts. And it doesn't use any theme or anything from like the rest of the song. It's just loads of random signature EVH licks just like strung together. Not a bad solo by any means. It's still pretty cool like in isolation, but just in the context of the song, nah, it's quite a big miss in my opinion. Next up, we have another slice of premium 80s fromage with one of the greatest, most anthemic power ballads of all time. Not that this solo is like exactly terrible, more like it's just a huge, monumental missed opportunity. And to be honest, in some ways that's kind of worse. This song has one of the most hugest, most anthemic, sing-alongable choruses of all time. Here I go again, oh. So you'd think the band would want to do like something as equally epic and awesome for the solo, right? Right? Usually in power ballads, the solo comes at like the peak of the song, what everything just sort of like builds and builds and builds and mounts to. But the solo in this song is just like so limp. The song just like dies a horrible death when the solo comes in. It's also not helped by the fact that the solo is played over the verse arrangement for some reason, which is just like really just like static and monotonous and boring. The best thing about soloing over power ballads is just like you just get to rip over like really cool chord progressions and just like Still, bloody amazing tune, Obviously, I didn't write it, so yeah, joke's on me. But, it's just annoying to think about how much even cooler the song could have been if it had a sick solo, yeah? Now, even though I am a Pantera enjoyer, I am by no means a mega fan, so I may be missing out on some crucial, critical lore here in terms of this song. But I always wondered, what the hell is going on in the solo in this song? My best guess is that Dime was just being like a contrarian troll at the time or something, and just subverting expectations by just shouting out this absolute mess of a solo. Either way, if it was meant to be a joke, then it's not very humorous. And if it's meant to be serious, then there's no way it's meant to be serious. Or maybe they just couldn't settle on an idea for this solo, so they just smashed the glass and pressed the emergency rock and roll button. But if you listen very carefully to the solo, you can hear there's a few layers to it, so there must have been, some degree of thought put into it, right? To be honest, it wouldn't be a problem if the song wasn't such a fucking banger. Both the main riff and the drum beat is just one of the most, iconic in all of metal. If anyone has any interesting intel or information on this song, I would be very curious to hear. But yeah, fucking wank, mate. Sucks. So I know that Dragon Force might not exactly be at the top of the list of bands to take super seriously, but still, there's a limit, There's only so much a man can take. I'm an absolutely monumentally huge power metal fan. You guys know me. And I've always loved Dragon Force. I do think they're a sick band, but even their goofiness goes too far sometimes. The song Valley of the Damned is a, beloved absolute classic from their debut album. It's no doubt one of the highlights of the band's discography. Actually, it's one of the rare occurrences in their songs that actually has like a riff, believe it or not. And the chorus is like, it's just beyond epic, anthemic, so catchy. It's amazing, amazing song. But man, that solo just blows chunks. I'm not exaggerating here, but quite literally like 50% of the solo is just the same annoying, monotonous sweep tap lick just played over and over again with like increasingly irritating variations each time. Not to mention the absolute heinous, egregious overuse of whammy pedal as well that makes even Thomas Morellian look like a liberal user of the effect. The solo is redeemed somewhat after with a very cool lead guitar harmony melody thing that's super tasty. But too little too late, and it's this just turgid slop that came before it that just stops the song being S tier. Okay, so I know that this pick might be a little bit controversial, as for some reason the solo seems to be quite well loved and liked in the metal Megadeth community, but I'm sorry. So you might not vibe with this take if you're not a guitarist, especially one that's been playing, a long time, like I have. But man, this solo is just like, I always thought it was just so uninspired and cliche to the point where it's just like, for me personally, it's just unlistenable. It's just like a skip every time. So I get that they were probably trying to pay homage to their Nwabum, inspirations or something, but honestly, this section just sounds like, it sounds like it was just copy and pasted out of one of my, Iron Maiden parody shit posts, literally. Both the chord progression and the way the melody follows the chords, it's so stock, so AI. It just sounds like quite literally zero thought went into it. It's a real shame considering how awesome the song is. And, in a Megadeth song, one usually looks forward to the solo, right? That's the part of the song that is always going to be a banger. But yeah, in this case, the rest of the song is fucking killer and the solo fucks! Now, don't get me wrong here, Sonny Jim. Zakk Wylde is one of the most iconic guitarists of all time and is playing on the classic Ozzy stuff, especially No More Tears and all that jazz. Absolute perfection. However, I think it's quite difficult to disagree with the fact that after a certain point, Mr. Wylde just kind of stopped trying and became a parody of himself. When there's a Zakk Wylde solo on something, you know exactly what you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting some furious, spammy, pentatonic licks, brutal squeals, some super wide vibrato. So there was a few songs I was thinking about putting here, but in the end I went with I Don't Want to Stop, because I remember this song was huge when it came out. I think it was on wrestling and everything, that's when you've made it, when you're on fucking wrestling. And there was a lot of hype around the album that this was on. I think Black Rain, I think it was called. Ozzy blew up again at this point when this album came out. It was pretty big. Yeah, it's corny as fuck, and most of Ozzy's later output is overproduced beyond all hell. But yeah, who cares? It's still super fun, super catchy. It's a good time. That solo though, oh my god. It literally sounds like the result of a music AI, approximating, the sound of, the most cliche, Zakk Wylde solo. Zero phrasing, zero thought, just a load of crappy stock licks just so he can, just clock out and collect his paycheck and be on his merry way. And to make matters worse, the whole solo, for some reason, is just drowned in wetness and wah. And you can barely hear what's going on in half of it. So, it just ruins any impact that the solo could have had. It's so weird. Much like Mr. Hammett, I do think that Zakk is another example, unfortunately, of a guitarist who strayed so far from what made them great in their prime, that they're a completely different guitarist now. The late, great Chuck Schmoldinger will forever go down in history as, you know, one of the greatest metal musicians of all time. The man was an absolute fucking machine when it came to churning out riffs, and in my opinion, and I don't just say this like hyperbolically, he's the greatest harsh vocalist in metal. Yeah. But dear God, I'm sorry, but I cannot say the same about his lead playing. He did for sure have a very distinctive, cool style. You know, you can tell a Chuck solo a mile off, which is, you know, always a good sign. And he did have some chops, but the majority of his solos were just like so self-indulgent, and dare I say it, kind of amateur in comparison to the music he was like trying to make. It's not really as noticeable in the earlier stuff that was a bit more primitive, but like, you know, as the music got more ambitious, I think the weaknesses in his playing definitely became more exposed. I had a few songs in mind to stick here, but I went with Flesh and the Power It Holds because I think this is like a perfect example of a pretty fucking killer song that is kind of ruined, in my opinion, by an absolute like abomination of a solo. I'm sorry. It's literally like a minute or just over a minute of like aimless, self-indulgent noodling over like a, not dissonant, but just like a really sort of like lo-fi clean guitar riff. It really feels like it never ends. Just so many things bother me about the solo. I don't know why it irks me so much. The note choices and the licks are just like really, really amateur, and like the melodies just like sound like a fucking nursery rhyme. And it's like when you compare it to the fact that like, you know, this album was meant to be some sort of like, you know, arty prog thing. Why are the solos like this? And like the tone and the attack and the insanely like wide vibrato are all just like ridiculously over the top and like inappropriate considering like the context of the song. It's just, maybe I'm missing something, maybe I just don't get it, but yeah, this one is so bad. Come on, surely you knew there wasn't not going to be a Slayer song on this list. But unlike the other solos on this list, you know, the solos in Angel of Death and a lot of Slayer solos in general are just like so iconically awful that they're actually fucking amazing. Slayer somehow managed to make an art out of concocting like ridiculously like terrible solos. Like I can't think of any other band that does it as well as Slayer did. Like even though the solos in this song sound like a cat being mangled in a washing machine, somehow they're still kind of catchy and like you can sing along to them. Though I wouldn't advise doing it in public. You know, boys and girls, it just goes to show that if you're gonna be bad, you know, at least do it with conviction and people won't care. They will love you for it. Cheers, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. It was a lot of fun to put together. Next up, unsurprisingly, we're going to be looking at terrible songs that have amazing solos in. I haven't quite finished putting the list together yet, so if you have any ideas for that, please do write them down below and I shall consider them in due course. Take care out there, love ya, and I shall see you very soon.